We're starting with Furiosa, the newest film in the Mad Max saga. Some people upset that Max isn't in the movie. Some people ecstatic. Some people a little bit on the mid side, considering that Fury Road is considered to many as one of the best movies of the last decade, maybe of all time, maybe of the franchise. So, boys, I got to ask y'all, where do you stand with Furiosa, a Mad Max saga?
Ewan, start us off. You caught the movie at its premiere in France.
Where do I stand? At a 7-minute standing ovation at the Gun Film Festival. I don't know how many minutes ago. That's by the way a really silly thing that they tracked that with the clapping.
Yeah. I saw Kyle Buchanan say a thing that kind of like even exploded my own thinking about it a little, because he was saying that the standing ovation is very directly tied to how many people are actually in attendance, which makes so much sense, right? Like if you have a huge cast and they're going to give everybody a standing ovation, of course it's going to be longer. It doesn't necessarily mean they like the movie more.
Damn, that's a great point.
I mean, they start clap. I don't know if they do that at the US festivals as well, but they start clapping at the logos because production companies are there.
Yeah, they do that. Yeah.
But I'm not the biggest fan of the clapping myself. But I do really like the Mad Max Saga and Furiosa.
It's worth the clapping. It's worth the applause.
Yeah, I mean, it's like sometimes even the occasional woo goes out, like it would be justified. It's just a real thrill, and that's rare that we get to see that on the big screen, which makes me more disappointed from the box office numbers that have come in for the film so far. It's a bit of a letdown that people don't seek the thrill on the big screen.
That's been a big talk. I definitely want to get back to that part because I know that's been a big discussion of the movie.
Yeah.
In terms of it being a prequel, because I think that's a big part of it, that people have kind of gone about this movie in a way that feels kind of weird, because out of all the prequels that we get, all these side stories, all this extra mumbo jumbo that you get from all these big franchises, how is this not the epitome? This to me is exactly what I want a side story to be. This to me is exactly what I want a prequel to be. I think this adds so much to Fury Road. Even if it's not better than Fury Road, damn, does it make some sequences in Fury Road stand out even more. I think it's also him directing at all levels. I think the colors pop just as much as before. I think a big debate I've seen people have within the movie is the CGI. I was very critical of the trailer. I think they fixed a lot of stuff from the trailer. I won't deny that it's still heavy on CGI, but I think artistically, visually, it worked for me. So from that point, I thought it was a standout. I thought it was incredible, and I did not expect that just like Mad Max Fury Road had Furiosa be like the standout character, Furiosa now has Dr. Dementis as the standout character in this one.
Yeah, this franchise is all about the supporting characters kind of overshadowing the leads at some point. But I guess that's what you get when you make your lead character like a really stoic, quiet character who's got, 30 lines of dialogue in the whole movie?
Yeah, I think that's what he went on the record saying, 30, which is still double what Max had in Road Warrior.
Right.
I think he had like 16 in that one. So it's interesting. This is where a director who says, I don't want any talking happening in my movies, this is like it done right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just, I don't know if George Miller is the greatest action filmmaker of all time, but he certainly has made a case for it across this franchise. Just the staging of these sequences is unreal. I don't know if either of you had a favorite particular set piece. I just really love the first war rig set piece when we get Anya hanging off the bottom of the war rig. It's just
stowaway.
As the stowaway. Like, it's just one of the it harkens back to my favorite moments in Fury Road, is the whole like actions having consequences nature of how many of these fight scenes play out. It's not just that like somebody's going to make a move to try and fight or shoot or whoever the person next to them, but because they make that move, there's always kind of this like consequence, whether it's opening up some other angle or it's like loosening your grip on the bottom of the speeding war tanker, and it just has this really kinetic feel. You get a really palpable sense of the stakes from moment to moment. It's not just sort of like a wash of fists and movements and cuts. It really is like thrilling and and so incredible to look at. You can really read the action.
Yeah. To answer your question, I'm going with that the specific scene in Stowaway where the like octopus floaty thingy gets caught up from the whirlwind in the back.
The boomy knocker.
Woo! That was incredible, bro.
Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. What about you, Ewan?
I really like the opening. I think that one's just a great kickoff into the whole, like it
nice.
starts off with a chase, and
Yeah.
I feel like that goes back to, I guess, Fury Road and then, you know, not the biggest fan of the chaptering of it all, but I think that's a strong opening.
Yeah, I mean, something interesting about this movie, considering that they're really selling Anya Taylor-Joy at the center of it, is that she doesn't really show up for what is it, like 45 minutes to an hour into this thing.
Yeah,
and it doesn't really matter. Like that opening section that you're talking about, Ewan, is so suspenseful, and it's suspenseful in a way that I don't think a lot of Fury Road was suspenseful, because while Fury Road has this sort of unstoppable momentum, it feels like a ball rolling downhill. This one is much quieter. It's much more dire. It feels much more fraught. You know, it's centered around a whole child abduction and kind of like a ticking clock element of it as they progress closer and closer to camp. But just the way that they're able to kind of execute this whole sequence, not through kind of huge movements and explosions, but kind of like the quiet looming threat. I thought it was really, really well done.
Yeah, they knocked it out of the park. And I'm usually the person who doesn't like the chaptering. So the fact that they had the chapters going on here, the guy next to us was groaning after every single chapter. I loved it. I don't know. It worked for me. Like Zach was saying, the idea of not having her be in the movie for that first hour had me questioning, like, this is the Anya Taylor-Joy movie. Like, are we splitting this into part 1, part 2? Then finding out in the interviews that the little girl does have Anya's face AI'd onto her.
Yeah, they did some machine learning to sort of like match the eyes a little bit more.
Yeah, she said it goes from like 80 and they start going down to 30. And then that's why that middle part where they start introducing her, it's a little bit lankier than what Anya really is until they cut to the part where it is fully Anya. And then I would argue they must have done some voice stuff, because towards the end, there's still going to be a jump that happens between Anya and Charlize. And they do some voice stuff where she's facing the other way. I swear it was Charlize talking. The voice gets a lot deeper. You know, you do have some shots that then lead into Fury Road. I thought it was seamless. I'm sure people will then come up with arguments against the AI because people interpret AI to whatever it is. I think it's a tool that they used effectively in this movie, and it worked wonders.
Yeah, it's interesting, the elements that you're talking about that connect to Fury Road, because I feel like, you know, we're obviously in this era of sequels and prequels and tie-in films and spin-offs, and I feel like I'm so used to the connections between the films being so kind of like passive and not really integral. Like it's really just a shoehorned in tie-in to be like an Easter egg, but there's like a real kind of like two halves of one whole thing happening here with Furiosa and Fury Road, in which they kind of feed into each other. And even though, you know, we saw by virtue of like it coming out first, we saw Fury Road first and then went into Furiosa. I feel like you could have an equally enriching experiencing for Furiosa first and going into Fury Road without it necessarily like tainting either. Even though I don't comparing the two films, I do feel some differences between them. They just work, how they work together, I found to be really interesting. I don't know if that all worked for you, Ewan.
It really did, and I think it goes. It really speaks for George Miller as a filmmaker who's done all 5 of these films. That these last 2 seem to be a bit more connected, but I'd even make the argument that they stand on their own apart from that ending quite well, of like a loner that gets introduced. Maybe less so with the last 2, but the first 3 are so like different. It doesn't need to be Mel Gibson in the films. It could be totally someone else because they feel different. And he still has so much.
They're gonna come after you, bro. I learned the hard way.
I'm so, okay, I'm gonna keep my lips.
I
sealed.
realize Mel's got shooters out there. They love that man. But I agree with you. So we'll get shot together. They're like myths. Each tale can stand on their own.
Yeah, and we talked about this when we covered it on the Quiet on Set podcast. That Lachlan brought this up, that he feels like there's no other person, maybe other than James Cameron, who would be able to craft a world so rich of his own imagination on this
That's
scale,
the
and it would
thing.
still work. So I feel
Yeah,
like it's George Miller that brings this, and already has had like that whole Furiosa thing
Mhm.
crafted when he was shooting Fury Road. That's why this movie works so well, I think.
In playing the video game, they've got a Scrotus, which is the brother who's not in Fury Road. And it's like,
Yeah.
why? What happened to him? How did he not end up there? I'm playing the game, and answers in the first 10 minutes. The man has a bio on there. You read through it, and it says when he fought Dr. Dementis during the 40-day war. I was like, this man wrote the movie a long time ago. It was in the bio of this game.
Well, I went and watched.
So realized.
I went and watched Fury Road immediately after leaving the theater and watching Furiosa, and it's all there. It is all there in the movie. I'm surprised how like fully realized it is, but that to me again is one of the things where actually it speaks to some of the differences between Furiosa and Fury Road, in that like Fury Road, in its propulsive nature, never really stops to do story at you. It never really stops to kind of fill out the characters, and it's in these sort of like quick flashes, quick moments of that you get with the characters, that they do such an incredible job of building the world that you don't even need those story moments to get a picture for the story. And I think that Furiosa is maybe like indulging in that a little bit more, taking its time a little bit more. It you know, just by virtue of Chris Hemsworth's really charismatic performance as Dr. Dementis, they give him a lot of lines that just make things that you could infer a little bit literal. And I think that's, you know, when you talk about the segmenting of this movie as well, I think that you can feel the pacing not quite as clicky as it is in Fury Road. Now, granted, they're completely different movies. I don't know if Furiosa should necessarily feel propulsive the way that Fury Road feels. Fury Road is just like one big car chase, and this movie is more of that origin story. But I think it is something that kind of separates Fury Road and makes Fury Road like just this incredibly special piece of action filmmaking. Not to diss Furiosa, because I loved Furiosa as well, but I think it is something that makes Fury Road even that much more special.
It's also 2.5 hours. I think it's the longest.
Yes, it is the longest Mad Max movie.
There's a lot of fades to black. I know all the movies do it, but this one did have a bunch. And I was like, damn, okay. I absolutely adore the movie. I think it's incredible. I still think I'd have Mad Max Fury Road because I had rewatched it. Catching Thunderdome in a very crispy quality. Not Thunderdome. Sorry, apologies. Obviously, some people really like it. Road Warrior. That one holds up. Like, I understand why people come to bat for that movie. I think the whole franchise is incredible in the way that it's able to take like what would be Easter eggs that we've been saying, but it fits within the world, because in the world of the Wasteland, everything gets repurposed. So you see like leg braces that characters were wearing from the old movies. That's why you see music boxes from the old movies coming up in Fury Road, lines that get passed down. It's such a realized world that it just works, especially when you're kind of segmenting the movies in a way where Road Warrior has someone telling you the story. This one has the history man telling you the story. So it becomes this idea of a mythology, and it works so well. What didn't work for you guys? Where else besides the runtime and some other aspects do you think it falls short that perhaps could be a reason why it isn't making as much, or people aren't seeking it out?
I don't know why people aren't seeking it out, but I think my biggest thing is when we get that transition from the younger character to Anya Taylor-Joy. I think that whole thing is a bit clumsy in my eyes, and I'm also not the biggest fan of how much Hemsworth is kind of on the back burner when he's such a focus on building up his own mythology and like the cult around him, and then in the second half, it's more like that deteriorating and falling apart. And I feel like it needed a bit more. Like for a 2.5 hour movie, I wanted more of, I guess, that relationship. But it makes sense for the story that they're telling, where we now aren't with I guess Furiosa, and she's not with him as much. But I just kind of wanted a bit more of that to lead to a finale, like a big talking moment there that like feels a bit more rewarding. Although I feel like the ending is also well done. But those would be my main two gripes with the film.
The 40-year war happening in 40 seconds or the 40-day war. That was another one, right? It's like maybe they're gonna do another video game, another movie to it. I would go see a prequel to Dementus. I think that would be dope. Zach?
The Battle of Bastards, just
Hell yeah,
yeah.
But in sand, the sand movies. That's the key to 2024. Put sand in your blockbuster, and you have yourself a hit.
It is, yeah.
I don't have too many gripes with it. I think like my only complaints are that it's not one of the best movies of all time. Like I'm going back to Fury Road, and it's just so chock full.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so chock full of memorable characters, memorable moments, memorable lines. Like I don't know if there's any line quite as good as the whole bit about do not become addicted to water, for you may resent its absence, but stuff like witness me, stuff like what a glorious day, stuff like that's bait. Like it's just Fury Road is so full of it, and maybe with more times to revisit Furiosa and pull it apart for those little moments, we'll gain that appreciation for it as well. But I'm not immediately struck with it nearly as forcefully as I was immediately struck by Fury Road. And I knew from the second that I left the theater 10 years ago that Fury Road was one of my all-time favorites. And I love Furiosa. Just comparing it to the other action films we've got this year, in stuff like Monkey Man and stuff like Civil War and stuff like The Fall Guy recently, it's head and shoulders above him. It's the best one.
Above Dune 2?
And that's a good question. That is a very good question.
For me, no. But it's
for me, neither. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like right there. But it's not. Yeah. It's not.
Different grains of sand. You can't mix them. You can't compare.
Right? Yeah. A little bit different.
Yeah. I'll go. You know what? Here, let me do my quick ranking. I got Fury Road, then Dune 2, then Furiosa, then Dune 1. How about that?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So I have the Dunes, and then I have the Mad Maxes. How about that?
Oh, okay.
Together. I'll have them together there. If it's all one combined thing, especially with this new trilogy, it seems like they're all going to be one thing. I will also add, as we get into the box office talk, I'd seen that a big part of discussing Mad Max Furiosa is that you need like about 2 paragraphs about your own personal experience. It seems that that's the thing that Twitter was really on about. So for me, a big part was I remember watching Fury Road in 2015. Waiting in traffic for about an hour, waiting in line for another hour, then getting stuck up in the front like this, having to witness Nux and everybody else do their stuff. And years later, bro, got to walk right in. I think all the boys here, all a part of
that's
press.
The journey.
That's the journey right there.
The reserved
so for
seat.
Me, it was a big up just to reflect on that since the last one, just all the movie accomplishments and stuff that we've done. Honestly, all the 3 of us, and when we were there, they even gave out some Furiosa shirts.
Ooh,
looks super dope. So,
the back. Yeah. It's a great image. It's her like in gold, something like that, coated, right? That's
in the movie.
That's a great poster.
I had a great experience with it. Look, it's not even a movie that you need to see in IMAX because it's not necessarily formatted for IMAX. I'd say Dolby because of the colors, because of the sound is the way to go. But I definitely do think that this is one to watch in theaters. Watching Fury Road at home, I have a great setup. Many times I go to the theater, I'm like, I can watch something better at home. Fury Road is that one where as good and as crispy as I could have it at home. How did they not release a double feature?
Yeah, I don't get it.
Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I did it myself at home.
Yeah, like we had to do it ourselves. That black and white version also.
Chrome.
I haven't sat with the whole thing yet. Or the chrome edition. Lena said she almost preferred it to the original colors, and I know that they tweak it because it's not just like a monochrome Adobe Premiere effect that they throw in there. but it allows the movie to pop a lot more. So I'm very curious to see how the movie does, because going back into the box office, I do think that it's not doing that drastically different than what Fury Road did. I also
No.
feel Fury Road had legs. We just didn't have Twitter as up in arms as every single thing needs to be nowadays.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's also that, like, because of the sort of hangover effect of last year's work stoppages, the strikes, there's fewer movies sort of like around it. So I think a lot of pressure is on the movies like The Fall Guy and Furiosa to sort of prop up the summer box office. Like, if you look this upcoming week, there's no big release. Like, what's going on? It's the summer. But there's just sort of like this absence. It's still the first Mad Max movie to debut at number 1 at the box office. So it's not like it's unsuccessful. I think a lot of it, and
what's beat Fury?
That's a good question. Maybe look it up. The thing that we've returned to a lot in these discussions about like whether or not a box office actually is poor is ultimately the money that gets spent on these films. And Furiosa was not a cheap movie. It cost about $160 million. And I believe that's even before marketing costs, being marketed pretty heavily. I'm like you, though, in that I believe that movies like this have legs. Like, these are movies that people like seeing on the big screen. Miller is obviously like a top tier action filmmaker. I think it's going to continue to, accrue some money over the next couple of weeks. And it won't, by the time that we're around to PVOD and stuff like that, it won't feel like the financial failure that a lot of people are trying to make it out to be.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think once people get to rewatch it again, they'll like it even more.
A couple quick things before we move on from this. Ewan, I don't know if you had something.
Just that it got beat out by Age of Ultron, which, I mean, does make sense.
Oh.
And the other thing is that there's a reason to concern. I don't know if you guys know Dan Burrell, but his box office breakdowns are very insightful. I can recommend them to anyone who hasn't seen them. But adjusted for inflation, it's like the third worst Memorial Day opening.
I did see that stat. Yeah.
And I mean, that stuff is just a bit concerning that overall, like, we are currently in a phase where, like, we haven't had $100 million opener, and we probably won't until Deadpool and Wolverine. And just overall, it's just been a bit like lackluster when it comes to just people going on. I guess less than that. I'd say around, probably guessing about 80.
80?
I don't know.
Damn.
Just guessing.
Look, I can't deny that the streaming stuff, right? Because that's been a big debate as well. We could do a whole segment on that. Ticket prices and people going, well, I live in the middle of nowhere and the ticket prices don't affect me. It's like, well, yeah, but the middle of nowhere isn't where the most people are at. It's the cities. Yeah. Like, come back in November. Let me know where the voters are, right? At that point, it's the people living in the cities that end up having to pay the most. And this idea that people also need to go support movies. We're movie guys. We talk for hours on movies. We watch 60-something at film festivals. Even we know what religious type of thing is it to like tell people you need to go support this? Nah, people buying food, people buying gas. Like, not everyone's going to be on a subscription service like other people are. And I feel that we many times yell at an audience, which already is the wrong thing to do. Why aren't you out there supporting a movie?
Why aren't you on A-list?
Yeah, like, that's when you know you're living in a bubble, right? And we're probably more dedicated than most people on film Twitter. We can tell you that that's not the approach to tell regular people, especially when they know that studios are now releasing this stuff, 3 weeks later? How's Fall Guy not going to fail?
Just Fall Guy. Yeah.
So I don't know. That's a big debate that I have there. But keeping to the movie side, I know there was some other stuff that you wanted to bring up, or if you had another point, box office, streaming wise.
Yeah, well,
what incentives you got for people?
Talking about the box office, I did find this point kind of interesting in the Deadline article that apparently, according to Post Track, 52% of people went to Furiosa because they said it was part of a franchise they love. 34% cited director George Miller, 32% Anya Taylor-Joy, and 25% cited Chris Hemsworth. So despite being, thought of as one of our elite movie stars who's top-lined a huge Marvel franchise, Chris Hemsworth is not as big of a draw for this movie as Anya Taylor-Joy, who's out for all intents and purposes on the rise star. But neither of them was as big of a draw as George Miller, which I think sort of goes back to a point that I've tried to talk about on our podcast, is that, like, I think a lot of the big draw for people right now is seeing the event films from big filmmakers on the big screen. We go to see Oppenheimer not because we're really interested in the story of Oppenheimer, but because we want to see Christopher Nolan's interpretation of it, his vision for it. And you know, when we're talking about the failure of some of these movies, I think that I don't know if this franchise in its current iteration has that much appeal outside of people like us who are really into George Miller and into like kinetic action filmmaking. But I wish it would transcend. I think a lot of people find it too weird.
It is definitely weird. Maybe that's why they don't see Chris Hemsworth in the role, because he's got the Bradley Cooper nose on him. So that could also be another reason.
Yeah.
But
The nose is crazy.
the nose is wild. There is a story element to it. I heard him talk about that. It's because he got beat up so much. So it's technically all mangled. And I'm like, oh, okay. I like that. I like how Josh brings up that even in speaking of box office, dude may have not crossed 100 the first weekend, but it's at 700 mil now. I think we do have a lot of sleeper hits now. We have to look at the box office differently in this landscape. That's why Elemental snuck up. That's why a lot of other movies end up making more money after the fact. And seeing what the first one did, you know, at the end of it all, I think there was that big debate, the lawsuit that Miller had on WB for revenue. So obviously it made money if you sue him for some revenue.
Right.
Look, I as you mentioned earlier, they already had this story, and they have that Wasteland story. They have another movie, be it Hardy or whoever else they might get. If they went younger with Furiosa, they go younger for Mad Max. But the idea was that in order to make Fury Road, they came up with her backstory and what he was doing the year prior. They got those storyboards ready to go. And you know that for Mad Max, storyboards is the script. So I'm ready for that. I know we had some stuff in the chat, and a lot of it deals with the cast. A big one that I saw there, if you want to bring up who had given it a mention, because I think we're to blame, Zach. They ended up going with this boy right here who, look, I don't mind. He was horribly good in The Souvenir. Tom Burke coming in the stowaway sequence to play like, you know, kind of like a version of Mad Max, but the person who ends up becoming Furiosa's mentor. It was supposed to be Yahya Abdul-Mateen.
Yahya Abdul-Mateen, yeah.
That's my boy. I hope he didn't leave for Aquaman, but there is a chance that he left because we saw him on Broadway. So if it was for the Broadway performance, I'll take the
bring back that water quote. You know, you're gonna like water too much.
Yeah, that lines up so perfectly. The news at the time said he left Furiosa to work on a project that he was very passionate about, and I can't imagine that was Aquaman. But getting the chance to be on Broadway, oh man, I really would have loved Yahya Abdul-Mateen in the role. I just think he could have made that part maybe a bit more elevated to me, but I thought Tom Burke was solid. Like I did enjoy him in the part. I mean, I know some people were really, really taken with him, but to me, the standouts are still Hemsworth and Taylor-Joy.
Easily, 100%.
And Charlie Freeney, is that her name? The Charlie Fraser, that's her name. The woman who plays Furiosa's mom at the beginning of the movie. Do you recognize where else you've seen her recently?
Yeah, anyone but you, bro. The moment she came out on screen, I was like, that's right, she's Australian.
Yeah.
They had said that they wanted Furiosa to be Gal Gadot at one point. She had tried out. And I got a lot of Gal Gadot vibes off of her, but more chill and more likable. Yeah. She killed it at that beginning. This is also like, she has an act. This is her second movie.
Yeah, it's crazy. What a come up.
So shout out her. I am one who also thinks that they should have shown more of the green. I think that was a big thing they were kind of teasing from Fury Road. Seeing her be one of the leaders, I think they could have easily held their own with it. You also had a lot of family ties. I don't know if you've seen that Elsa Pataki played 2 roles. She's obviously the mother with her at the beginning. Then she's a dude who's all scarred up. That was pretty cool.
Hemsworth's wife, if anybody doesn't know. Who else attacked?
They are the better version of what's her duo? Who always appear? Or technically, he appears in hers.
Melissa McCarthy and James Falcone. Is that his name?
I know he appeared in her Netflix movie.
Ben Falcone.
It was he played like a Best Buy employee, a little corny, but they made up for it here because she had 2 really dope roles and it allowed them to all be together there. The guy who plays Erectus said that he had his boy as a war boy behind him in a lot of the scenes. I thought that was really adorable. And then you have like so many people who just play multiple roles as well that I thought was pretty cool. But I'm really curious to see what the younger Furiosa is going to do, because she was in 3,000 Years of Longing, right? That was the name of the movie.
Yeah.
She played young Kate Blanchett, so she's on that, playing the young version of A-list actors, and usually that ends up being a good run for people. But I don't know if there was anybody else who stood out for y'all or any other questions. But
it was her. She was really good. And there's another film I haven't seen yet that just came out on VOD, Sting, that she's also in.
That's when I realized that she was going to be in this, because all the press is just her going, "I'm in Furiosa." That's also how I knew, because having seen her in that, you're like, wait, they did something with your face. So that's also like a really interesting thing, to see yourself up on the big screen, but it's another actor's face on you. I thought she killed it. I almost even prefer the first hour of that young Furiosa over the latter hour of Furiosa, but some people may disagree there. But yeah, overall, I think it's worth catching in theaters. I think it's worth the extra money to see it in Dolby. And I'm very excited to see how they're going to expand it. Go rent the game. It's like $5. Go buy the game. It adds a lot to it. Find the comic. It adds a lot to it. I just think the whole world in general that he's created, that started back in 79, worth it. One of the best storytellers that we have out there for sure.
We got one question from Josh in the live stream I did want to bring up before we move on, asking if we thought Furiosa looked visually strange at all. He loved the movie, but thought it gave off Spy Kids vibes sometimes. You were saying earlier that you thought that they fixed the CGI from the trailers a lot. And I agree with you, even though I don't think it looks quite as tactile as Fury Road. Okay, so yeah, I was trying to say that I think the worst CGI shots are the ones involving children, which makes a lot of sense because you don't want to throw actual children in the middle of those chaotic action sequences.
Have them fighting like Charlie's and Hardy of the first movie. Again, I don't know if you guys have rankings. I think Ewan did have a list, if I'm not mistaken, for your favorites.
For Mad Max? Yeah. For me, this one's third, straight down the middle, but Fury Road at the top, Road Warrior, Furiosa, first Mad Max, and then Thunderdome.
Nice.
I think I'm gonna be very similar to you. I'm waiting on Thunderdome. That's the last one, and I'm rewatching the Chrome version. But I think Fury Road's at the top. That should be a whole 5 stars for me. So I'm gonna be fixing that rating. The second one really holds up, dude. I don't know if you've seen it, Zach. It is weird in the best ways possible. And
the finale is amazing.
Yeah, it really does hold up. I see why some people really stand by it, and why so many people just know it as the Road Warrior, because that's just how they released it over here. So I think it's what got a lot of people into Mad Max, and they still hold that as the I don't know, the prime example of what the movies can be. But what Fury Road did was incredible. I think Furiosa is one of the best prequels, side stories we've ever gotten. Like, just comparing it there, give me more of that. Star Wars, take notes. Everybody else, Marvel, everybody take notes. But I think it's one of the best franchises to get into. Even Thunderdome, from the clips that I've seen so far, I don't think it's the worst. But you got a video game, you got the comics, get into it.